Y'all ready to get funky?
I've always liked learning about game development, especially researching specific games and how they came to life. Jet Set Radio was one of the first games that sparked that interest for me. It was just so vibrant and fun, but there was also a lot of mystery behind the world of Tokyo To. Today's video will dive into the development of Smilebit's rollerblading adventure. Let's learn more about the concepts of Jet Set Radio. Seriously, that pun really wasn't intentional. I promise. Surprisingly, for a game that didn't sell amazingly, there's a good amount of info about Jet Set Radio floating around the internet. Unfortunately, it's not exactly compiled super well. Luckily though, there is a new community building around this idea of collecting all this information in one place. So I definitely encourage you to follow the Jet Set Radio Archives Twitter and join their Discord server. It's pretty dang simple. They want to archive anything and everything that's Jet Set Radio related. So if you want to join a really passionate community, I recommend it wholeheartedly. This isn't like a sponsorship or anything. I just really like the group and I really like what they're trying to do, so I thought I would help and try and boost the signal a little bit. A lot of the info they've already collected is going to be showcased in this video, so credit where credit's due. To sort of set the stage a bit, let's talk about the developer behind the Jet Set Radio games, Smilebit. So Smilebit was born from a company restructuring of Sega in 2000. During the early and late 90s, Sega had two major research and development departments: the Amusement Machine or AM department, which handled arcade development, and the Consumer or CS department, which handled console development. Both departments were turned into 9 and then eventually whittled down to 6 independent studios. As one of these 6 new studios, Smilebit got a lot of staff from the CS1 team. These are a lot of the people behind the sports games, PC games, and ports from the Saturn, and most notably, the Panzer Dragoon games. The goal of this restructure was to kind of combine different skill sets to create more innovation at Sega. It seems to have worked because this restructuring gave us one of Sega's most vibrant IPs. The main driving force behind the world of Jet Set Radio was director Masayoshi Kikuchi. There's not a lot of info on Kikuchi before Sega, but we do know that he joined the company about 6 months after the Japanese release of the Sega Saturn, which would put his hiring date around May of 1995. His first project was designing boss battles for Panzer Dragoon 2, eventually moving on to enemy design for Panzer Dragoon Saga, and during this time he would meet eventual Jet Set Radio artist Ryuta Ueda. Ueda's origins are even more unknown as he's been less prone to doing interviews, but based on some limited information, he began at Sega around the same time as Kikuchi, possibly earlier. His first work was done on the intro sequence to a Saturn game called Astal, before eventually moving on to the Panzer Dragoon series. During the development of Panzer Dragoon 2, Kikuchi worked on boss battles, while Ueda worked on character model production. The two probably worked together a lot and formed their friendship during this time. It was during Panzer Dragoon Saga's development that Ueda started drawing the original designs for Jet Set Radio. When Kikuchi saw them initially, he was instantly interested in building something around these designs. Luckily, the work environment at Sega during the Dreamcast era really encouraged innovation, so Kikuchi and Ueda began to work on their new project, joined by eventual lead graphic designer Kazuki Hosokawa. Initially, it wasn't easy to find a concept that fit Ueda's art. Kikuchi recalls the game potentially becoming an RPG or an adventure game, but felt that it didn't really fit. He wanted it to feel simple and easy to pick up right away. One of the first solid concepts was a city-based side-scrolling game, but that was quickly thrown aside for just being uninteresting. Kikuchi felt pressure not only from his bosses at Sega, but also from himself and his team to deliver a good game. Hosokawa also recalls struggling during this point in development. Kikuchi, Ueda, and I had just finished developing Panzer Dragoon Saga, and we didn't know the nuts and bolts of game creation. But we were just a couple of young guys with a strong passion to create our very own games. There was a time when I, for example, got fed up with the process and considered moving on to another project. Eventually, our little project caught the eye of Takayuki Kawagoe, the producer, and he told us to give it a try because it sounded interesting. Looking back at it now, it was quite an unprecedented start of a project. Most of the team were young, with Kawagoe being the only staff member older than 30, but their youthful energy would propel them further. As Ueda's designs pulled more and more influence from the vibrant culture of the late 90s, aggressive inline skating came up as an inspiration, and it was really embedded in youth culture. The Smilebit team decided to throw it all together and see what would happen. And it worked! One idea kept leading to another. The street fashion design placed the game in an urban environment, a well-sized city with lots to do and explore. The headphones and the character designs inspired the idea of a constant radio station, which led to the Jet Set radio station and the concept of DJ Professor K. Ueda also did a couple of concept art pieces that felt a little more dystopian than the final game. Ultimately, the new vibrant direction of the project moved away from that idea into something much more colorful. Jet Set Radio was also one of the first games that used the cell shading method to make its colors pop. I'm not exactly a game designer, but from what I can understand, cell shading is a lighting rendering technique that uses flat colors over gradients to represent shadows, making it look more like an animation or a comic book. Jet Set Radio's manga dimension, referred to by its team, was developed not only in part to Ueda's designs, but from in-house experience. The team was fortunate enough to have someone in-house working on cell shading, and they pulled that experience into Jet Set Radio. During an interview with IGN, the development team also explained how they made some innovations with the cell shading. Whereas previous projects might have used the same outline thickness for their artwork or characters, Jet Set Radio changed that between the models, emphasizing characters or details with thicker outlines. The exaggerated look makes it feel more comic-based, or in this case, in line with the manga dimension. This new style of cell shading may have also influenced some of the cutscenes, which featured hyper-stylized comic panels to tell the story of Tokyo-to. While Jet Set Radio had an interesting development period, that's not to say it was easy. Ryuta Ueda was working on initial ideas during the development of Panzer Dragoon Saga, which would have put the start of development around late 1997, as Saga released in January of 1998 in Japan. However, it's been said in interviews that programming didn't start until the middle of 1999. The earliest public version of Jet Set Radio was shown off at Tokyo Game Show in the fall of 1999, from September 17th to the 19th. With only a few months to have a trailer ready for the press, it's safe to say there might have been some headaches with development. According to an article from Games TM, the development period from programming to final product was really only about 10 months. That's definitely a massive time crunch considering that the game was pretty big in scope for a 3D game at the time. Masayoshi Kikuchi remembers initially that although Sega gave him a lot of freedom with the project, it couldn't allocate a lot of resources to something that wasn't fleshed out. Because of a lack of staff at this point, possibly due to the Sega restructuring, the Jet Set Radio team didn't have any programmers on staff for close to a year. You can start to see why programming didn't start until mid-1999 because there wouldn't have been anyone to program anything. In any case, Kikuchi does say that the time spent building the world and the characters was actually a good thing and values it for shaping what Jet Set Radio would become. Even when the project was rolling along, it would still hit some bumps every now and then. Because of all the back and forth of applying different game concepts to Ueda's art, the team had trouble describing what Jet Set Radio was supposed to be. As a result, it had less support from Sega for budgets and resources. It was really a time of trial and error, especially with trying to program concepts like the graffiti system and the movement from skating to grinding to wall riding. I'm sure anybody who's made a Jet Set-esque game can definitely relate to that issue. Even when things were nailed down gameplay-wise, there were still pitfalls with development. Designer Masayoshi Yokoyama remembers programming the grind speed and running into a bug where the characters didn't lose momentum when they would hit a rail. Rather than trying to make it feel more realistic, Yokoyama realized it would actually keep the action moving and kept the bug in, tweaking it based on character speed. But keeping every bug is not a good idea, and sometimes it's not even bugs that make you reassess game ideas. Kikuchi remembers redesigning the entire Shibuya-cho level with Kazuki Hosokawa very late in development, maybe just because it didn't feel right. There was also a server mishap just before Jet Set Radio was completed, and it almost threw the entire project into chaos. There's definitely some ups and downs with Jet Set Radio. Rounding out the team was eventual series composer Hideki Naganuma. There's not really a lot of info on Naganuma's timeline with Sega. All that's been revealed was that he saw an ad trying to recruit sound designers at Sega, applied and got the job. His first work was editing audio for a revolutionary girl Utena visual novel on the Sega Saturn, which would probably put his hiring date around late 1997 to early 1998, as the visual novel released in May of 1998. Naganuma moved on to doing music for Sega Rally 2 before eventually joining the Jet Set Radio team. According to Naganuma, his work on Sega Rally 2 led to an offer from sound director Fumitaka Shibata to compose music for Jet Set Radio. A lot of Naganuma's work involved composing what we know as the really iconic tracks from the game, but he also gave some direction for the licensed music, making sure looping between the songs made sense, and even did some sound effects for the Jet Grind Radio and the Dela Jet Set Radio releases. Hideki did most of his work in the office, with a lot of it being done on an Apple Mac. It's not said what model he had, but I feel like Hideki having a colorful Mac G3 to make Jet Set Radio music just makes so much sense. The sound team would also meet with the programmers to see how their sound effects and music fit with the game, and what tweaks would need to be made to increase drama and tension with the story. Naganuma's process involved hearing the song in his head, then working on each instrumental part from low to high end, building and layering to get the final result. All of this happened in the 10-month development period, so Hideki was sleeping at times in the office due to the time crunch. He recalls working on the track Rock It On and kinda laughing at the sound of the vocal chops from his female vocal sample. Was it really funny though, or was it just the fatigue? Maybe Hideki will tell us on Twitter. Either way, his compositions were a key pillar for Jet Set Radio's connection with its fans. There are other composers involved with Jet Set Radio like Richard Jacques and Tomonori Sawada, but there's not really a whole lot of information on what they did for the game, unfortunately. Despite all the madness, it all worked out, and Jet Set Radio would start its promotion campaign. It was first shown off at the Fall Tokyo Game Show in 1999. Articles from that time say they only saw a 30-second trailer showing off the artistic style of the game. Most journalists were able to try it out at E3 2000, noting that it felt fun and visually appealing. It was around this point that the name change occurred for Jet Set Radio in North America. Because of trademarking issues, the title was changed to Jet Grind Radio. It's never been made clear as to what caused the issue. A possible theory noted in the Jet Set Iceberg video was the release of the debut album of a band known as Jet Set Satellite, but there's not a lot of info linking it to Jet Set Radio. There's a lot of interesting and funny stories to cover with the promotions of the Jet Set Radio games, but this video is more focused on game development. Let's move on to talk a little bit about cut content from the game. Like I mentioned before, this video is meant to cover what's already known about the making of Jet Set Radio, but it should also shed some light on some lesser known details and hopefully inspire people to keep looking for more info. I'll start off by talking about some stuff I've covered in other videos. There were some revisions made to the textures between the early versions of the game and the final Dreamcast release. The most well-known changes are covered on the Cutting Room Floor website, so let's start there. In Benton Show, there's a circle area you visit a couple times during the story. There's a lot of posters featured that definitely needed to be changed before the final release. First one is the Darkman poster that I thought was inspired by Batman Beyond, but actually is a ripoff of the new Batman Adventures title card. The Darkman name was also copyrighted, so the visual was tweaked to look like the final Dark Suitsman poster. There's also some more risque posters that would get replaced by samurai and mecha movie posters. It definitely seems like the original texture was meant to be inspired by Shinjuku's nightlife, but it probably would have caused some issues with game rating with Sero, Peggy, and ESRB. Another texture changed was the burger joint facade. Originally, it said Burger Queen. Like most of the other issues, this is probably just something they wanted to avoid, especially with it being a combination of Burger King and Dairy Queen, but honestly, who knows? The last interesting poster is this Swatch Beat poster that was replaced in the final game. The Swatch Beat was a digital watch introduced in 1998 from Swiss corporation Swatch and had its own way of telling time called beats. The watch would tell you normal standard time, but there was also a counter towards the bottom of the watch that went from 0 to 1000 in a full day. Each number was a beat, or 1 minute in decimal time, which is equivalent to 1 minute and 26.4 seconds in standard time. Based on the limited knowledge I have, apparently it was just a marketing ploy, but it would have been kind of interesting to see it advertised in Jet Set Radio. What's kind of cool though is that it actually does appear in the Jet Set Radio episode of the High School Seiha Girls anime where they skate around Shibuya-cho. Character textures also saw a few changes from demo to final release. Now, I've messed this up a couple times, so I think I'll get it right this time, so let's try it. Beat's original design used the katakana for ereki, or electricity. You can also tell, obviously, by the lightning bolt and the light bulb. There's also a second beta design that's closer to the final version, but the record looks a little bit differently and the font is slightly different. The final version just has that black record on his back and his shirt saying beto and katakana. Gum's design doesn't really change too much, and the katakana is basically the same. Tab's design did have some slight changes. The initial design had the symbol for Ko on his cheek and Su on his shirt. There's also a few characters going down his pant leg in the original design that represent his Japanese name and eventual JSRF name, Korn. His final design also has the same characters but in a more stylized look. There's a few things left, but nothing too notable. You know, things like placeholder assets, demo visuals, a couple music edits, but there is this interesting spray art that's labeled as grf_samsung.afs. It's kind of weird that it's actually labeled as Samsung. Samsung did make the initial optical drives for the system, but the sprays are labeled as Game Hub, Video Hub, and Learning Hub. Maybe it could have been tied to the online graffiti service, which may have been a lot bigger than just uploading graffiti. Obviously, I don't have evidence to claim that, but that was just a theory. One thing that is kind of cool is this unused DJ Professor K line, which does actually get used in text form in the Jet Set Radio Game Boy Advance game. Here's what the audio sounds like.
I'm the Ronin of the radio, cutting rhymes with a Yamato. That my she got the spirit inside of me. I got no equals, just like Miyamoto Musashi. Like a katana to your cranium, Sega games, just keep playing them. With lyrics like a bullet train, so tight, it's like I'm doing judo on your brain. Let's fight, but you can never beat me. With my lyrical karate, so call it hip-hop or rapper urban haiku, it'll bust your head like a pair of nunchaku. You're choking on my flow while eating your udon. I'm spilling that wasabi on the microphone.
We can look at images and audio all day, but I feel like looking at a more finalized product, a visual experience, is a bit better. So let's look at some old Jet Set Radio promo footage. You can definitely pick out a few things from watching old clips. One of the presumed earliest trailers was uploaded by Java Finch from a promotional disc called Dreamcast Express Volume 5, which was given to members of the Dreamcast Partners, a fee-based service that gave out promotional material for upcoming games. From the info on Sega Retro, the disc was given out in February of 2000, which makes it possibly one of the earliest Jet Set Radio trailers out there, since there's no footage of the game from TGS 1999 that's been confirmed. The most striking thing you'll notice right away about this trailer is the logo. Instead of the iconic green and yellow look of the Jet Set Radio logo, it was originally going to be orange and yellow. This does seem to be somewhat late in development because Beat does have his final textures, but a lot of the UI elements are still different, like the spray can icon and the arrows pointing to the graffiti. DJ K's full model is also on display in case you weren't sure if he had legs. Unfortunately, there's no playable version of this build, but let's talk about one that does exist. The Jet Set Radio Taikenbon demo was given out with an issue of the Japanese Dreamcast magazine. It's fairly similar to the final version, but there's still a few changes that would be made before the release. DJ K's movements are a little less exaggerated, and there's a slightly different Jet Set Radio logo on the wall to his right. There's also voice lines only found in this version, which are basically just DJ K explaining the controls. Aside from that, the only real difference is the timer not having milliseconds. Everything else is pretty much the same. Sort of finish up, I'm going to show off some other cool little tidbits from some game trailers. This trailer in particular features male voice lines for Piranha, which is kind of odd. In a couple of the trailers, Poison Jam appears in Benton Cho instead of Kogane Cho. Maybe it wasn't modeled until later in development. Like I said before, some of the UI elements would change, like the spray can. The timer font also does change quite drastically from beta to final release. There's also this one clip that shows a gray rectangle that moves while Beat's skating. Wishful thinking on my part thinks that it could have been a mini-map, which would have been a complete lifesaver. Probably the most interesting trailer is this one from IGN. First thing you'll notice, DJ K's room has a lot less speakers and the walls are a lighter shade of gray. His model is also slightly different in this version, and the cutscene doesn't really track his head like in the final version. My favorite part is definitely Gum standing on a pile of broken police cars. This trailer also features a Beat spray that's not been found anywhere else, and although the footage is really washed out and low res, it does look like Beat has his original Areki textures and Tab has his original textures with the pant leg design. I'm thinking this actually could be the 30-second trailer from TGS 1999. Obviously it's unconfirmed, but it kind of does match up with some of the descriptions from the articles. We'll have to do some digging and find out. But to end this all off, enjoy this really odd trailer that was promoting Jet Grind Radio in North America.
Let's look at the funk.
Would you stop playing with that radio, Lord? I'm trying to get to sleep. Would you stop playing with that radio, Lord?
Listen up, it's time for your daily dose of Jet Set Radio. All right, everyone, throw your hands in the air and let the groove take control.
Nich to the left. Suspects are seen climbing out of both windows, male Hispanic and a partial male black.
This is most disturbing. Let's look at the funk.
Here's another one.
All right, that's it for this video. I know it was pretty long, so thanks for watching all the way through, I hope. If you want to get involved with researching the Jet Set Radio games, be sure to follow Jet Set Radio Archives on Twitter and join the Discord server. If you want to learn more about Jet Set Radio, you should definitely watch a video from my buddy Nate B64, who went through the entire Jet Set Radio Iceberg. You might recognize a voice or two in that video. I'll include all these links in the description and all my sources for the video. Like always, I'm FalseProof. I'll see you next time. I'm going to take a nap. This took way too long. Bye.